This podcast was produced by OAR FM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On Air.
And welcome to the OI podcast, the Otago Institute podcast, conversations with experts from the worlds of arts, sciences and Mātauranga Māori. Brought to you by the Otago Institute, the Otago branch of the Royal Society for Arts and Sciences. Kia ora, nau mai, haere mai, and welcome. For those of you new to the OI podcast, I'm Dr. Barb, a quantitative ecologist with a background in modelling, climate change, biodiversity, conservation prioritisation and SciComm, and a PhD in botany from Ōtāko Whakaihu Waka at the University of Otago. We hope you enjoy our mix of conversations with experts from the worlds of arts, sciences and Mātauranga Māori. And today, joining us in the studio, we are so lucky. We have got textile artist Pip Steel for the Art of Boro, exploring the history and practice of Boro, a traditional Japanese technique centred on repair, reuse and storytelling through cloth. Now, there's a whole series of events that kind of go with this amazing visit by Pip Steel here to Otago and hosted by the Otago Museum, Tahura. There's an exhibition, Boro Time-Worn Textiles of Japan, from the 22nd of May through to, which is obviously today, as this is going live, opening this morning and right through until the 11th of October in the People of the World Gallery at the Otago Museum, Tahura. Hand-stitched, skillfully repaired pieces passed down through generations, telling stories of resourcefulness, care and connection. There's also a free talk, which is Saturday, 11 a.m, the 23rd in the Barclay Theatre, but unfortunately, bookings are essential and it is sold out. I guess it's possible that some people might free up their tickets, so keep looking there. There's a drop-in session following that tomorrow afternoon, Saturday, just after that talk. And yeah, it's quite a few little activities. There's also a workshop, I believe, on Sunday, but I think that's also booked out. So what I'm hoping is that during this amazing talk that we've got here with Pip Steel, we'll be able to convince her and, of course, Tahura Otago Museum that they need to put on a whole bunch more workshops, because obviously me being the slightly disorganised person that I am, at times I failed to get my booking in time, so I do not have tickets there. Anyway, without further ado, welcome Pip. Thank you very much for coming along.
Kia ora, Barb. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
An absolute pleasure. And I absolutely love all things textile Japanese, basically. we've had a couple of Japanese friends come on the show. We had Hatsumi come on and talk about Japanese food and diet. She's a dietitian from Japan, and that was an amazing talk. You'll have to go back through the episodes to when that was, but it was really that kind of introduction. And I think for me, the two things that really talk to me about a culture are the food and the everyday textiles, clothes. So I don't know if you're...
No, I quite agree. It's they have a finesse and a way of approaching the world which is quite special. And the more I've investigated Boro, the more fascinated I've become with Japanese culture and appreciative of, what they bring to the world. And these Boro textiles are quite fascinating. I came upon very unexpectedly when I was looking to do with a piece of indigo. I'm waving around here, but that's where it started. I was looking for recycled indigo fabric to make.
And of course it's that startlingly deep blue. It's just indigo, something that's been dyed with real indigo. You can really... you can just see it straight away, can't you?
It's incredible. I mean, that's really the interest in indigo that got me going. And I love it because depending on how many times it's dipped into the dye bath, you get these beautiful shades of blue, and they fade differently over time. And so anything that's made of indigo, and especially the Boro textiles, they're all many hues of blue, and they just have a real a lusciousness and a depth of character, really, which because of the dye.
And do you grow the plants? Do you dye the fabric yourself?
No, I don't. I've always wanted to try. It's not too late, but I could well do. I've got friends who do. And I know it's not easy, but it's worth a go. And no, I took the shortcut. I tried to purchase recycled fabric online, and I got it. I started maybe 20 years ago, like wanting to do this quilt, and I found the fabric, and often it's hand woven and hand spun, and it arrived, and it's just beautiful. Yeah.
And do you have some whakapapa that's to Japanese culture, or where was your connection there to Japanese fabrics? Did you just come across it and think, oh, I love these fabrics?
Well, what happened? The whole thing was serendipitous, really. I had a son who was a typical teenager, and I felt I wanted to do something positive for him long term, just to try and improve our relationship, really. So that's what got me going. I thought, right, I'll make a quilt for him and I'll do it in indigo. And through finding the indigo fabrics online is what brought me to Boro. And then so the whole circumstance, sort of one thing led to another, and opened up this incredible world that I had no knowledge of previously.
Right. But of course you had you had a history as an art history school teacher, embroidery courses through correspondence, a BA honours from Victoria in Wellington, a postgrad diploma in museum and heritage studies, and embroidery and design from Loughborough in the UK. So this is all kind of before you started this quilt, is it, or mixed in amongst there?
No, way before. And so what happened was I've had textile exhibitions of my own. I've always loved textiles, made my own clothes over time, and
did you start making your own clothes as a kid?
Yeah, when I was young, and I don't do it anymore because I've run out of time. But so I've always loved textiles, and it's been in my DNA, so to speak. And I've also collected some old textiles, like samplers in the past. So I've really appreciated old textiles, but never orientated myself towards Japanese textiles until I started sort of looking for this indigo fabric, and then finding...
So you really came at the Japanese textiles through the colour blue.
Yeah, through blue. Indigo blue led me to it. And then I spotted these ragged, tattered rags, which in fact Boro stands for rags and tattered.
So it's B-O-R-O.
B-O-R-O. And it's almost a derogatory word in Japanese, I've come to learn. But it actually describes these very well-used, well-repaired, mended and patched and worn again textiles that create a layering. It's almost like a generational use of an object that is either worn or used in domestic textiles, and mended and remended over time as the fabric abrades and wears out, as fabric does. And then they cut bigger objects like clothing and bedding down and reuse the textiles in smaller things, like possibly aprons, or then into bags, until finally the last segment of the life cycle of a piece of fabric is into a cleaning cloth. Yeah. And they often use these remnants from previous lives in these cleaning cloths, which they then will use until they wear out. So,
and the actual fibre, is it generally silk, cotton?
No, very rarely silk, because these Boro textiles were from the countryside. They were from farming and fishing and forestry communities with people who lived in very simply, didn't have a lot. And so they're
a bit more tough, a bit more hard-wearing.
Well, yes, and they couldn't afford the silk, which was for the wealthy. So originally they were hemp or rame or linen.
So some sort of plant fibre.
Really hard-wearing. But they also used bast fibres, which were either usually just gathered from plants that grew wild, like paper mulberry and linden.
Right.
And they would prepare the fibres, then they would spin the thread, then weave the cloth.
Right.
And then they would dye with the indigo.
So you're kind of beating that outer layer of the plant off and just getting the fibres from the middle of whatever it is, whether it's linen or, as you say, rame.
And in the old days, because cotton was introduced into Japan, and in the cold north it didn't grow, so people in the north still had to use these hard-wearing, tough fibres in their clothing
which
for a long
kind
time.
of analogous a little bit, I guess, with linens now, as opposed to cottons. Because I think I'm just kind of drilling down a little bit, because I think that kind of indigo blue, people associate that a lot with denims and jeans, and of course there is cotton that's dyed with indigo blue, and that whole kind of blue colour that's associated with jeans, but there's also other fibres there.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Traditionally, cotton wouldn't have been in Japan.
No, it wasn't. And it grew when it was introduced, it grew in the south because the south was warmer, and people did prefer cotton when it arrived, because it had really strong insulating properties, which the base fibres didn't have. So, but it was a cost thing. Especially for farming families, because cotton was more expensive. And in the north of the country, it really wasn't available until there was the Kitty-May-Bune shipping route, which transported recycled fabrics, reused fabrics from the south of the country up to the north.
Right.
And fishing traders took cotton up there, and then farming families would often gather together and buy a bale of these recycled indigo cottons and use that as well. So there was quite a trade in it in the early days.
Yeah, and I guess there's a huge resurgence on kind of TikTok and Facebook Reels and things of people doing upcycling, and quite a lot of that kind of centres around, I guess, those blue denims, but also around Boro and sashiko. And I wondered if you could just highlight for us the difference there.
Okay. So what happened was the fabrics that we used, they were often in the countryside. The indigo is associated with those work textiles and the fabrics that they use for living, like futon covers and rugs, etc. And they were always stitched, and in Japan, they did a running stitch called sashiko, and it was often used, just a running stitch, just in the early days.
Which is fast.
Yeah, they did it very quickly.
Yeah.
They had a different way of stitching than we do in the West, which foreign visitors observed when they got there.
How is it different?
Well, with the West, we put a needle
in and then back
and out, whereas they pull the fabric towards the needle, and it's just a different way of working. They work very quickly.
And interesting. I guess because if you're doing the same stitch all the time, and a running stitch is perfect for that, you kind of get it started and then just pull the fabric through the needle.
Yeah,
it's much quicker.
They use a thimble. Sometimes it's a metal one or a leather one, and it helps push the needle through. So you do a lot of stitches at once on the needle and then pull it through.
Rather than kind of the Western way is to kind of do one stitch and work it in and out. And I mean, I wonder if that's because of the history, that the Western history more of embroidery and lots of different stitches all together, whereas if you're just concentrating on kind of making making the fabric stronger and putting it together, and there's a lot of stitches in doing that because you're kind of covering the whole surface, aren't you?
Yeah, they do.
And then you just want something really fast and kind of...
So they're securing the patches, they're mending and reinforcing areas of worn fabric, and they're also creating a sense of insulating these fibres because it was very cold there in the winter.
Because you're putting lots of layers
out
together, and you've got little air pockets between them, which is giving you that insulating and I guess also durability as well. If you're a hard-working farmer, you're out there and it's kind of like knee pads and things. They're kind of padded a little bit and they're wearing a bit easier.
And I'm just wondering about the stitching. I think probably it's a speed thing as well, because they were very pushed. They could only
everything is if you're doing anything in kind of making everyday clothes and things. I think it's always a speed thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you've got so much to do, you've got so much work to do.
Well, they've been working in the fields or the forests or gathering crops, etc. in the daytime. So really at night, that was the only time that they had to mend and repair and fix their family's clothes. So. Yeah. I think speed was
speed
essential.
Is the thing, yeah. No, I'm a huge knitter, and I whakapapa to the Shetland Islands, and that whole industry there and that whole culture there about knitting and in the round and the way that it's all knits and you go round and round. It's all to do with speed because you're being paid by the piece, and if you've got time, you're left over, you're knitting stuff for your family to keep them warm, but everybody's pushed because, as you say, they're doing it at night, they're doing it in low light, they're doing it in between other jobs that have to get done because it's that kind of, it's not luxury goods.
No, it's not. And the thing is, the fact they do it for their household, for their families, they'd keep doing it, and then it would be passed down, to the next child or to the next generation. So it was a generational thing. And they really tried to keep these textiles going for as long as they could.
And I guess the actual production, because a lot of this is sort of mechanised mills and things as well, the origins of these textiles. So actually producing, like all the way from taking the plant matter and making it into the fabric, the weaving, the spinning, all of that is really time intensive. So the actual fabrics themselves are quite precious and quite
absolutely. They didn't throw anything
time
away.
Expensive to make. You can
nothing
see that.
at all away, and it made it. I think that and the sense of life being tough and them not having a lot to come and go on, really, both those factors really made the fabric really, really precious, and they would have had a completely different attitude towards it then than we do today. We have it today as something really disposable, and it's terrible what's happening today. Yeah. So I think one of the really significant things about Boro, it makes us reassess how we use our textiles and what our textiles should be, and try and encourage the recycling and reuse philosophy. It's just so critical, really.
We had Kristen White here last year for the runway revival that they did, and they did again this year with it was Shop on Carol, but now it's the Op Shop Social, and I imagine they'll do it again next year. And they do it all with recycled fabrics, some with clothes, some with things that aren't clothes, and the designers make the outfit out of recycled fabrics, and it's amazing some of the outfits that come up.
No, it's incredible.
So, yeah.
And they had a saying in old Japan that you should never throw away a piece of fabric that was any bigger than 3 soybeans. So
three soybeans is quite
tiny.
Small.
So they kept everything.
Wow, no, it's interesting unit of measure as well, isn't it? A soybean, 3
I know,
soybeans.
and it just showed everything was sort of valued, and they kept these little scraps, and when they needed to fix or repair one of their working textiles or domestic textiles, they'd use their stash and make the ends.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing was that the wear would always be on the outside, but they'd always put the patches on the inside. So they didn't do it.
That's
to
the
be
opposite.
seen.
It's kind of the opposite of how we kind of think about patching. I would automatically think you put a patch on the outside of something.
No, well, and
that's interesting, isn't it?
And that's with Boro. Often you can see the abrasion and the wear on the outside, but it's the underneath part that the Japanese stitches of history never intended to be looked at is what we see and appreciate. So it's the reverse of what you'd expect.
That's quite interesting, isn't it?
And, a Japanese writer, Alex Kerr, said that, it's often on the back of things where the secrets lie. So and that's very true.
And I know that with all sorts of fabric historians, where they're trying to figure out how people made it, it's all in the seams and the seam allowance and the stitching and just exactly, it's all that kind of hidden underneath stuff. But yeah, it's really interesting. Is there differences about the kind of the shape and the form of the clothing as well?
Well, they were very economical, and that they cut their kimono out of straight panels, and so they could be undone and reused. So it did help in the reuse recycling.
So right through from the design of the clothing, it's with a vision of it being reused after it's not being clothing anymore, which is quite interesting.
And nothing wasted. So, if they did have to tuck something up on the inside of a kimono, like with children's kimono, they often made them larger and then took tucks so that they could be lengthened when the child, or would widen when the child grew. They just fold it over and have it there and just let it out accordingly. So it was very, very cleverly thought through.
It's actually interesting because there's this whole thing called pattern, like no waste patterns that there are, and I've had discussions with other sewists about them, and people sort of say, oh yeah, but like you basically, and I believe I may have said this as well in the past, you're just kind of wearing that extra material that you would have wasted when you were cutting it out. It's not like you've actually saved anything because you still had the same size piece of fabric. You just like throw it out at the end of the clothing rather than like you're kind of wearing it around in some sort of baggy fashion. But actually where it really does play is, as you're saying, if you're intending to reuse that same fabric for another piece or another purpose, or even just for the changing shape and size of the person who's wearing it, which is actually what I wasn't thinking about at the time. Yeah.
No, it makes it more versatile and more usable, and the options for reusing are more varied, I guess. And and I think it was born out of necessity, but it created a way of looking at the cloth where it was valued.
You can sort of see that it's kind of like it. Yeah, exactly that. It comes from necessity, from the it's a way of doing, but it's kind of really woven in and like embedded in the culture as well. It changes the way you think about clothing and clothes, and
absolutely,
yeah, it's interesting.
And it's interesting. And I mean, as I've done the research for my collection of Boro textiles, I've sort of kind of learnt to understand the mindset. And the sort of cultural sort of mores and things which led to the respecting of things. And things, like motainai, things too good to waste, so that they, culturally too, they really, it helped them with their recycling.
Has this flown through into modern day with landfill? Is there a substantial difference in Japan?
I don't know.
Has that flown?
I don't know.
I wonder how much that's culturally still there.
Well, what happened after World War II particularly, the country really, I understand this, and I'm no expert, but it's just through my reading, that they wanted to foster economic growth so Japan could recover after the war. So they really pushed the idea that people bought new, and to foster that growth.
Yeah, and I guess that there was that was all around the world. There's quite a big sea change and things at the end of World War II. Yeah, no, it's interesting, eh?
Yeah, and I think that now they're probably as wasteful as everybody, perhaps, in the new world.
It would
I
be
think we all have a lot to answer for, really, I have to say.
But there was a big change everywhere because, of course, leading up to the war, there were, and during those war years, there was a lot of recycling and reusing of fabrics. I mean, everything was in shortages throughout Europe as well, so it wouldn't have been like unusual.
Not unusual.
And then, of course, there was this big resurgence of or invention, really, of people making things from patterns rather than made from a modista like in Bridgerton, or made to fit you, and people buying ready to wear off the rack kind of sizing, which kind of is that same sort of time period, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's interesting, and I just know from the history, really, the last Boros happened really in the 30s and 40s, and even in the 50s, just around World War II, they even mended hemp sacks.
Right.
So they could reuse those. So, things were really short supply in those years. But that's when Boro completely disappeared. And anything that's been happening since is really reproduction or fake Boro, I have to say.
Oh, goodness. Oh, that's so sad. Oh, I feel sad about that.
I know, but I mean, it's interesting because you can't actually do Boro. It takes life and wear.
Right, yeah.
And
it's just an interesting concept, isn't it? It's not something you can kind of intentionally make. It's like growing a rimu tree. You have to kind of start somewhere, and you're never going to get to see the finished object if you're starting it, right?
Hopefully it's all too
kind
long
of trusting
into the future.
trusting on other people, following on from you to and I guess that used to go through families, didn't it? So just going back to the exhibition. So the exhibition is Time-Worn Textiles of Japan. So these are not things that you've made as a textile artist. These are things that, so I was talking about all your amazing qualifications and your history there coming in, but the thing that I didn't mention, of course, was as a museum educator for 5 years in Palmerston North, and also your postgrad diploma in museum and heritage studies. And I guess that's really kind of the next bit, isn't it? Where, because you've put this exhibition together, is it your personal collection? Where did these tell us all about the exhibition.
Well, it was never intended really to be a collection. It's happened.
Because you're like me, you're a magpie. When you see amazing things, you think, oh.
But I learnt about them after I'd been trying to find this recycled indigo for Ollie's quilt. And then I read about them, and I just found the whole thing really fascinating. So I got as many books as I could, either in English, which were hard to find, or even harder to find were Japanese ones, which I couldn't then read. So I had to get Google Translate on my phone and try and sort of figure out what was being said. But I sort of learnt the background to the textiles, why they'd been created, what they symbolised, what they meant, and it had real resonance with me. So I rather anxiously purchased one piece in 2012, which was quite a modest, very modest, and not very worn or stitched. It was quite conservative, you'd have to say.
Yeah.
And that started me off. And then just the more I was reading and learning, I just kind of picked things up online, mostly, and it became a collection. And so now I have quite a significant collection of things which represent domestic life in past times in Japan.
What sort of time period are we looking at there?
Well, really people don't know when the old textiles first started to be mended, but it's obviously for centuries. But because textiles don't last, there's no real sort of evidence to suggest how far back it goes. Right. But the textiles that I've been able to find are 19th century through to early 20th century.
Right.
And, I think beyond that they've been worn and disappeared, or occasionally maybe fragments are found. But
it's always a thing with archaeology, with fabrics, because it's very hard to find them remaining, and especially if you've got the sort of the everyday fabrics that you're looking for, and especially if you've got this tradition of everything being used and then reused and then repurposed until it's basically worn through as a rag, and then I imagine it just goes on the compost pile.
Yeah, and that limits what's available. Yeah. And also it's interesting because I've learned that, well, obviously people in Japan who live through the hard times associate these textiles with hardship and poverty, and because of that,
they're not so popular now.
They are not popular with a lot of Japanese. They see them as shameful and not really valid as a textile. They really just want to get on with their lives now, and
it's quite interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
And you completely understand that. And it's often been Westerners who've really sort of appreciated these textiles and in a way that maybe some Japanese haven't. A lot of Japanese don't know about them, or if they have known about them, they don't value them. And in many cases, a lot of these textiles were destroyed because of the symbol for poverty.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I suppose especially coming out of the war like that and, the kind of not wanting to think about things. I can see that happens in cultures across the world, really. That's
I think part of the purpose of my show is to try and get people to reevaluate these textiles and see them as being a sense of pride and resilience and resourcefulness rather than a sense of sorrow. And, it's interesting, I've talked to Japanese people and I think when they've looked at them again and with a new light upon them, they realise actually, they can be grateful that their relations survived and were able to get through the tough times. And these textiles are really symbols of that. They're
resilience
and pride, just really important symbols.
I mean, even the ones in your collection, they must be at the very least 100 years old, right? And that at the time that they, we're talking about the early 1900s there, and actually to be Boro, they must have been started being kind of made and remade in the early 1800s for these ones. So it's for a piece of fabric, it's quite a long time ago.
It is.
It's pre-Bridgerton, people out there.
Yeah, and it's right. And it's very hard to date these things too, because when you look at a piece with the patches and the layers, often the most recent work might have been done perhaps, in the 1920s or 30s, but the fabrics that are actually on that piece could be much, much older.
Yeah. And the fabrics that are the oldest are on the outside, so they're the ones that are being worn away. I just imagine that you could get to the point where you've actually, there's like there's kind of I don't know if it's a proverb or a folklore or something, about like a shrine or a boat. Like if you start at one place and you have a boat and it's a wooden boat and you go out to sea, and as you're out at sea on this big expedition, you repair each plank. And at some point, before you get back to the shore, every single plank has actually been changed and repaired. Yeah. So the boat, in essence, is exactly the same boat as you left shore with, but there's no plank that's the same that was on the other shore. And it kind of seems like Boro
absolutely
fabrics
like
could be the same.
Version of that.
As it's wearing away on the outside, there's nothing really...
Yeah, it's a process and it's just ongoing. And so you can't sort of put your finger on it. But it's interesting. I mean, often in the West now, you see advertisements online for Boro workshops. So you can't actually have a Boro workshop because it's a misnomer. You cannot do Boro.
Yeah.
It has to become Boro.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
So I think,
So you're sort of, what are you doing? You're initiating the Boro process.
Yeah. You are.
Could we say? Yeah.
And it's always...
Because it has to start somewhere, right? The tree has to start as a seedling.
And it will be Boro. It will become Boro, maybe in 100 years' time.
If it survives.
If it survives and is reused. But unfortunately, at the moment, most of the textiles aren't worth surviving.
Do you feel a bit sad that the textiles in your collection aren't being worn? Because it's sort of halted the Boro process, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. And somebody asked me actually last night at the opening whether I'd worn any of my collection, and I haven't, but I could, and maybe I should.
Because it's not like it's a museum; it's a private collection, right? Yeah. I mean, now it's an exhibition at Te Hura Otago Museum, but in essence, it's your private collection, so you could just keep wearing them and add your own repairs to them over time, and they would still be a collection.
That's right.
But
and
they
I
would be
just add to the process.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one piece in the show which is totally made up of linen scrap. So it's not made of whole pieces of cloth, but it's made up of sections and pieces.
It's very quilt-like, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's very fine, very light, and that would be a piece that you could wear today on the streets of Dunedin.
Oh, my goodness, I think you should.
And be totally at home.
I totally think you should. I think you should just...
So, maybe they should be worn and used. And I do and I understand these pieces have had a really hard life, and I'm trying to minimise, any more hardness.
It's funny, isn't it? It's a real kind of catch-22, whether you kind of preserve it as it is, because it's, it's a historical item, it's hundreds of years old, it's, there's not that many of them around, and it's that kind of preserve versus conservation versus preservation. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's dilemmas too. There's dilemmas of appropriation, and I've given it lots of thought about, is it disrespectful to have these clothes from another culture, from a time of hardship, whether it's disrespectful to have these in an exhibition, and how should you portray them? And so I've really thought about it.
It's quite a lot to kind of get your head around and reconcile, isn't it? Because it's, especially with the kind of the different attitudes in different cultures to those clothes and the indigenous culture.
It's tricky, and I think I've had to justify what I'm doing and give it lots of thought. And I think by learning about Boro, what the cultural practices sort of behind it, the philosophies behind it, it's helped me sort of understand how I should put these shows together and with the help of the venues where I go to, in a sensitive way and showing understanding rather than just using it as something, as promotion. It's not that really. It's trying to promote understanding, really.
Yeah. And I'm going back to what we were saying right at the start of the interview. I think that thinking about the food people eat and the clothes they wear, that is kind of the base of understanding other cultures. Yeah, I think.
And I've had to work hard at understanding the Japanese culture.
Have you been to Japan?
No. I'm so embarrassed. No, I haven't been to Japan mainly because I've not for lack of wanting to, but because I've been purchasing these textiles and it's easier to find them online than it is actually in Japan, I've been told. But also it's been a cost thing. So because I've been buying the textiles, I haven't paid for my air ticket to travel across there. But I will
put that on your bucket list. That has to be there. So can we talk a little bit more about, you've got these workshops that go with this exhibition. So what are we doing in the workshops?
Well, I've just brought you those to show.
These are beautiful. So this here, you've got. Let me just describe this to the people out there. So you've got several layers of indigo. Is this cotton?
It's indigo cotton. Yeah.
And you've got these amazing, because some of them are kind of these wavy patterns of running stitch. Is this first one, which is beautiful? Have you done these?
These are examples. These are what I started when I first got into Boro. So I was buying these little segments of indigo, and then I was stitching with sashiko. Sometimes I was using traditional patterns, and sometimes I was using modern patterns. So
which ones are the which? Are the kind of long wavy ones? Are they the traditional ones?
No, the one there.
The star sort of geometric patterns.
A lot of them are representative of things in nature.
Right. And this one here has got the one that's got the kind of historical patterns with the kind, and I think anyone who's seen sashiko, this will be the one that they think of with the sort of the star pattern, and it's the indigo with a white backing. And
the backing I put on just as a bit of support.
Because it's quite fine cotton. It was fine.
Some of them are lighter weight than others, so I was trying to make them all consistent, because these small, that are rectangular panels, you have to say, that would all come together to make a quilt. And the quilt that I made
This last one's really overstitched. It's quite stiff, isn't it? With it's got so much stitching in that kind of same geometric, sort of almost like a woven. You've got some of the lines going one way and some that's almost looks a bit like tartan.
Unfortunately, the more I do it, the more complex I like to get designs, which take longer. So this second quilt, which is for my second son, is rather slow, I have to say. But it's interesting that these patterns are an offshoot of the running stitch that we talked about earlier. Yeah. And so it's been an evolution, really, of stitch from just reinforcing, just securing, just mending.
And then being decorative.
To being decorative. Yeah. And now sometimes you get a mixture of the two in Boro.
Yeah.
And this sashiko is really popular now worldwide.
Yeah. And is there something special about the thread? The thread seems quite thick.
Yeah, the thread's it's got a special twist to it. And you need a big eye and a needle to be able to thread it.
Is it always 2-ply like this?
It's always very tightly twisted, and it's
quite thick. Is it cotton?
It's cotton, and I always get mine from Japan. That's where sashiko thread really seems to come from.
Right.
Although,
which makes sense, right?
Yeah, but people try it with other cottons like pearl or whatever, and that's fine too. Depending on what you're going to be using the end result for. But
quite a lot of it the kind of beauty of it seems to be in the kind of underlying simplicity of it's just one stitch, but very, very precise. Like the gaps between each individual stitch and the length of the stitches themselves are very regular.
And they say that it should be the size of a grain of rice, and they mean small grain, not long grain.
Yes.
But having said that, when you look at the textiles, there's huge range. Sometimes the stitches are really long and very basic.
And I guess that depends where on the piece of fabric, the clothing, and where the stitching is, and also the intended use of the clothing.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
If you've got something on your knees, you want it probably more, and then other places you just got to kind of longer stitches because you really just want to attach the piece of fabric there.
Yeah, no, it's very versatile. And I think it's also quite interesting to note that the actual sashiko stitch, it's slow, it's methodical, like we mentioned, and it really gives you time to think about other people, think about your life. It's quite
meditative in a way, a little bit like knitting is,
slow stitching and really enjoyable. And I think a lot of people are taking to it because it makes them slow down.
Yeah, I can see that. And it's sort of something you can do, while you could do it there sort of as a kind of type of meditation, but you can also kind of do it while you're listening to a podcast or watching TV, or
very
you can
versatile.
Do it, more or less do it in the dark as well, because you just kind of, once you've got your line, you just kind of follow your line.
And I took those pieces to my son's cricket games and stitched there.
I can see that.
5-day
cricket, you need something
portable.
to keep your hands occupied.
Yeah.
There, now you've got a whole bunch of other stuff there. It's a beautiful book. Look at that.
Well, that was just, I'm showing, this is the modern, because sashiko has evolved, and a lot in my workshops it's not a how-to do sort of thing. It's really talking about the possibilities and what threads and patches lend themselves to, and what you might do with them. So,
because this is interesting, this one that you've got here, this more modern one, it's kind of the basic same stitch, but you've introduced colour, and are these just DMC embroidery cottons?
Absolutely.
But kind of taking the kind of general method, but changing up with the colours.
Yeah, and showing that to people just so that if you're using a patterned fabric, so that one's a printed fabric, which is
and is it
linen.
Thicker there? Have you got something glued together? Or
and I've
there?
Just stitched on, and I've experimented with possibilities, and it just shows you what you can do, because there's no rules with this modern work. It's more intuitive, and you're going with whatever backing fabric you've got and whatever patches you put on, and you can stitch in different directions, and you can freeform or you can be very structured. It suits all personalities, because you can work in the way that you feel most comfortable with. So it's fun. Yeah.
And when I was as a kid doing embroidery and cross stitch, the back of it was very important. Is that the same with sashiko? The kind of making the back look neat, or
they do that, yes. But with my ones there, that's a teaching sample. So I've left the threads loose. So just to.
How do they normally do it in the older ones? Do they tie knots in it, or do they?
No, they don't do knots. They would just go over an existing stitch a few times and then cut it and reinforce it. So it's very neatly done, and even if it is for the most utilitarian functions, really.
No, it's beautiful, and it is quite. You can see that there's a commonality between the kind of traditional indigo with the white stitching on it, and then the contrast through to the modern. Oh,
I'm just showing some pictures. There's some of the modern interpretations of sashiko and mending.
That's interesting. But these aren't ones that are in the exhibition. This is sashiko.
Yeah, this is just modern.
Things. It's interesting,
modern versions, and where it's gone in the last sort of 10, 15 years probably.
And you can really see the kind of the introduction of Western embroidery stitches, the little flowers and daisies, and kind of taken the kind of binary white or cream and indigo and the shades of indigo, and then changed up the stitches or changed up all the colours but kept the stitches the same.
Yeah.
And the kind of little step patterns, are they based on historic ones? Those sort of geometric step patterns that are very regular.
That's a traditional pattern, and it's interesting. It just shows you that because the West has taken to the sashiko stitching in a very enthusiastic way, they have really embraced and combined Japanese influences with traditional Western embroidery influences. So you're getting this sort of mishmash
of fusion embroidery
of cultural sort of stitch, which is great actually, because you're not pretending to be one or the other.
Yeah.
But I have to say it's very important to respect the Japanese way and traditions of sashiko, and not sort of appropriate that. So
it's kind of a fine line between kind of a homage to a tradition and I've got this. This is an amazing book here.
So there's a book that's
Sashiko,
just been published by a Japanese man who comes from
it's in English.
Yes. Oh, and it's literally hot off the press. He lives in America, but he comes from a long family sort of heritage of sashiko stitches in Japan. And this book is really his attempt to put the Japanese side of sashiko into the public eye.
That is beautiful, isn't it?
And I've been buying thread from him for a long time, and this man, Atushi, he has helped me understand, some of the questions that I've had for him about the garments and objects in my collection. And he's created this real masterpiece of a book. It's not a how-to book.
Yeah, it's beautiful though, isn't it? It's got examples from historic examples, all sorts of different ones, all the way through, and then kind of changing through into the current changes, and all the way through to modern, with the rise of the internet and how the right through. It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's had to fight, I think, to make sure that Japan or the Japanese practitioners have kept almost control of their stitch heritage, because a lot of Western teachers have sort of embraced it so enthusiastically that they've sort of done it in a Western way rather than with a Japanese understanding.
It's interesting, isn't it? And it's kind of like, did he copyright the stitch patterns? Can you do that?
Sorry, what was that?
Did he copyright the stitch patterns?
No, but he just wanted people to do it with the right thought behind it, and he's been very staunch in his approach to sashiko, and his mother creates the most amazing garments.
What absolutely beautiful book he's put together.
And so you've got the titles on the front, and it's literally just
Sashiko,
published.
The Untold Story.
Yeah.
Atsushi Futasuya.
Yeah, and I highly recommend that. It's just a wonderful sort of foundational book
isn't it?
to help you understand the Japanese way of doing it. And I must congratulate him on.
Yeah, this is not a how-to manual. It is a heartfelt journey into the soul of a craft that has been simplified in its rise to popularity. Sashiko, once a necessity for survival, has been romanticised, often detached from its cultural roots. In these pages, you won't find quick techniques or patterns to try. Instead, you'll discover the deeper meaning of sashiko, its place in Japanese culture, and the stories of those who have kept this tradition alive. And it's a beautiful book.
Yeah,
thank you for
it's
bringing
great.
that in. Yeah.
So I'm going to sort of show the students that come to the workshops, and it's just lovely to have that as a resource. And now that he's written it and made it available to all of us.
And it is a really interesting kind of area to bring up as well, because, you know, with the internet and globalisation of everything, and I'm always making the analogy back to that kind of Shetland knitting, because that's where kind of my fabric textile world is centred. And it's the same sort of thing, like you really want to kind of dive into the culture and the techniques, but also not cheapen it by kind of mishmashing it.
Yeah,
and I guess
right.
there's that kind of where you know, we were talking about fusion before and introducing European stitches into it, and I guess it's kind of a line where you're kind of pretending almost that it's the real thing, but it's not, is worse than just saying, okay, I've taken inspiration from some parts of this and some parts of this. And I kind of, it's that intention of how you're doing it.
It is. And it's being clear in your mind and not pretending it's not something it's not. It's, you know, you've got to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's a bit like the show in the collection too. You have to be honest about why you're doing it, what the textile or the stitching means, and just make sure that you do it with the right intentions.
Yeah. No, it's actually a really, and I guess that's where art is art. It's when you're doing something with your hands, but you're also thinking about it, and you're putting your mind and your hands and your heart all into the same thing.
Yeah, and I think with the Boro, it was never intended to be art, but it's become art because it's so beautiful, and Westerners have sort of appropriated it for fashion, and it's reappeared in new guises over recent years. But
I guess there's that difference between when it's being, you know, because it's a handmade technique, right? But I imagine you can do it with machines nowadays.
I guess you could too.
And I guess that's kind of the next stage of kind of mechanising it and taking it away from the original intention, because those original garments were made kind of generations of people putting their time and energy and handwork into creating something, and it kind of has that kind of, I don't know, like you were thinking with the quilt. In some ways, like the quilt that you're making your son, it's not so much in the actual quilt or the fabric or the techniques. It's in the fact of your time and energy and thought that's gone into making the piece that makes the piece special for him.
Yeah, and I mean, you could, and it's interesting. Atushi talks about people using machines now for doing what would be the modern equivalent of it.
I think that's heresy. I really like.
But it's interesting. He doesn't see it like that, and I'm only 3/4 of the way through the book, so I'm still sort of assessing that. I haven't quite come to a conclusion.
It really gives me an uneasy feeling.
I know. I must admit, I agree.
Because it just seems to me such a handcraft that's, you know, I don't know.
But it's interesting. I've got an apron which is on display at the museum in the show, and it's beautiful Boro. It's old. It's got amazing patches, but the most recent stitching added into it was machine.
Right, yeah.
And actually,
I mean, sewing machines have been around since the 1800s.
True, but it's also really historically interesting because it shows the time pattern between old to more modern in terms of its use and wear. So the machine stitching gives us a clue, which is pretty interesting.
It's interesting,
yeah.
Goodness me, I could talk to you all day about this. Pip, it's amazing, and I very much am looking forward to going along to your exhibition, and I will try and slip my way into one of your workshops as well.
Well, hopefully we'll run some more towards the end in October when I'm back, and I had no idea that they'd be so popular, but
there you go.
Although I should have known, because this is the 5th venue for the show. It's the first in the South Island, but In other places, the workshops have just been so well supported, and I think it's great because it brings people together. I have had a man who came who'd never even threaded a needle before,
Wow.
and he left.
I can't believe there's people like that
very
around.
happy. And
Fantastic.
It was great.
Yeah.
So I've just loved it.
Hey, thank you so much for coming along. Of course, that exhibition is open from today, the 22nd of May, right through to the 11th of October. And if you can, just have a look out on that Te Hura Otago Museum website for an edition of workshops and amazing things that Pip's, and it's all listed there on the What's On at the museum on their website. That's the best place. And all of the workshops, talks, everything, all have booking essential, and you can book them through there. But they are free, I believe. All of them, the workshops included, aren't they?
Well, the workshop on Sunday is a paid one, but the other,
Yes.
is drop-in.
Shouldn't be.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Shouldn't be doing false advertising here. Okay. Hey, thank you very much for coming in, Pip.
Thank you
and
for
it's
having
been
me.
lovely having you. You've been listening to the OI podcast with Dr. Barb in conversation with Pip Steel from the not from the University of Otago, with the exhibition at the Otago Museum, and what I'm saying there. If you've enjoyed this episode in particular, check through our playlist. Episodes 1 to 2, What the Ostriches Say with Jenna Lee Pfeiffer. Episode 94, Persian Textiles with Moira White. Episode 87, The Wonders of Wool with Gudrun Johnson. And episode 84, Central Otago Couture with Jane Malthus. And thank you very much.
You've been listening to the OI podcast, the shout out for the arts, sciences and Mataranga Māori.
You can support this podcast by becoming a member of the OI. Check out the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences on Facebook or our website.
If you'd like to listen again to this episode or others from the series, look for the OI podcast on ORFM's website, oar.org.nz.
Brought to you by the Otago Institute for Arts and Sciences, the Otago branch of the Royal Society of New Zealand.
This podcast was produced by ORFM Dunedin with support from New Zealand On the Air.